And we are live. All right. Awesome. Thank you for doing this, Michael. Nice to meet you. Yeah, let's get
My
right
pleasure,
into it.
Andrew.
Let's get right into it. You were excited to share your story, so
I
what's your
am.
story?
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, Michael Watson. I'm a qualified social worker. I've been a social worker for more years than I'd like to recall. Certainly over 30 years, anyhow, and working with children. Um, I have a story that touches on a number of things. You know, basically, many years ago, when I was a newly qualified social worker, I was working with a child, a 3-year-old child, um, and I pretty soon realised that I didn't want to go to see. Not, I was happy to see the child, but I was not happy to see the parents,
Mm,
and that was because the parents. I was clear that the parents detested me; they didn't like me at all. Um, and so I get this weird feeling, this kind of heavy feeling whenever I was going to see the child. It was an unpleasant feeling, it's a burdensome feeling. And I remember one day, picture the scene, it was a nice, bright, sunny day. And you don't get too many really sunny, warm days in the UK. It's kind of, it's a lot of rain and it's a lot of dampness. But this day was a nice day. And on nice days, I always feel good. But I remember feeling not so good because I was going to see this family, and I went up. They lived in flats, and I remember getting to the door, and I rung the doorbell, and as I walked through the threshold, it was like going into another world. It was like going into a world which is cold. It
mm,
was it was barren of any warmth, of any pleasantness. The place was it was almost kind of like it didn't have much furniture at all. Um, the parents never spoke to me. They never smiled. They never showed you any kind of warmth or welcome. The only person there that showed me any welcome was this little girl, 3-year-old little girl, um, and she was in her kind of like a cot type, not a cot, some kind of it's like a cot, but she was standing up and holding onto the rails,
mm,
and she looked kind of grubby. Her hair looked like it hadn't been washed for ages. She had her face looked like it needed cleaning. She'd been crying, and the stains of the tears, I could see in her face, and it was rolling down, and it was mingling with the kind of mucus from her nose, and she just didn't look too well cared for, and she looked grubby all over. But I remember she was always looking at me. Her eyes were always trained on me. They weren't looking at anywhere else. She wasn't looking at her mum. She wasn't looking at her dad. She wasn't looking at anyone anywhere else in on the flat in her flat. Her eyes were always just focused on me. She looked sad, very desperately sad, but I couldn't quite figure out what was happening. Anyhow, and that felt strange to me. It felt really strange about why she was just focused on me all this time. Anyhow, one day I got a phone call um, early morning from my manager saying that there'd been a tragedy on one of my cases and to come into work as soon as possible. Well, I thought tragedy. What did that mean? Maybe someone's got hurt. Maybe there's been some kind of problem. Um, anyhow, I got into work, and when I got into work, my manager asked me to sit down. I thought that's not a good sign. That wasn't a good sign. And then she gave me the news that changed my life, that turned my world upside down. She told me that the little girl, the 3-year-old girl, had been horrifically killed by her father. She told me that the police were involved now, and there'll be a thorough investigation, and I'd have to go to court to give evidence about it. When you have to go to court, obviously, she was saying I'd have to give evidence about what I'd done, what I hadn't done to keep her safe, to not keep her safe, whatever.
mm,
So I was kind of stunned. I was traumatized. Um, I'd never gone to court before. I didn't know what court was about. Didn't have the first clue about what court involved. When I went to court, eventually, because it wasn't straight away. Maybe you got a few weeks before you go to court, and there's lots of things going on. There's lots of whole sorts of stuff you have to go through when a tragedy like this happens. So eventually, I went to court, and the court I went to is in London. It's a big stone building. It's like a picture a cathedral, like a big stone building. And when you go in there, and once you get through the metal detectors and stuff, and when they pad you down after they find out that you've got nothing on you that is as a weapon or something that you shouldn't use. You're into court, and you're in the court, and then it's cold. It's a cold court. So it's a big stone building. But it's cold not just in terms of temperature, in terms of physical temperature. It's cold because courts they're not a warm environment. They're not a comfortable, caring environment. They're an environment in which there's a lot of adversarial. There's a lot of conflict. It's an unpleasant environment. Anyhow, eventually, I found my way to the particular court because that Royal Courts of Justice, where it is a huge place where there's loads and loads of courts. Um, and I don't know if you've ever been in court. Don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it's not. It's a situation where it's unpleasant, and that particular place, there's just a huge building. Anyhow, I found the court I had to go to, and then they placed me in the witness box. I was instructed to stand in the witness box, or stand or sit in the witness box. When you're in the witness box, it's a small place. You're kind of like, you can't go far. You can't move. You can't move. You can move a few feet to one side, the other, but you have to stay there. You have to stay there until you are released by the judge. And whilst you're there, the when it comes to you being cross-examined, the barrister who is against you is asking you questions, and these questions come in thick and fast. And if you can't answer the questions, and I couldn't answer the questions because number one, I was traumatized. Number two, I was inexperienced. Number three, I just didn't know what I needed to know. Yeah. So I'm being asked all these questions, and to me, they're like, picture the scene. I was like a dartboard. I was like a dartboard, a round dartboard, and these questions are like darts. And these darts are coming into me. They're hitting me all these different places all over. And there's nothing I can do because I can't move and I can't deflect these questions. They're hitting me, and I'm in pain. I mean, not in physical pain, but I'm in emotional and psychological pain. I'm in real agony, and I'm looking around the court, thinking, "Who? This isn't right. Someone's got to be able to help me. Someone must be able to help me. This shouldn't be happening. It's got to be someone who's going to help me. Someone's going to save me. Someone's going to come to my rescue." But I was looking around the court in vain because you don't get that at court. You're on your own. And right at that moment, at that very moment, it suddenly hit me. That is what that little girl was thinking about. That is what that little girl was hoping. She was hoping that I was going to come to her rescue. She was hoping that I was going to save her from the people that should have been caring for her, i.e., her parents. She was hoping that I was going to take her away from the harm and abuse that she was suffering. But I didn't, and I wasn't able to do that because I didn't understand what she was trying to say to me. I didn't understand what her eyes, her body language, and everything was trying to convey to me. I wish I had. Had I been able to, I would have saved her. I would have been able to save her. But I didn't understand at the time. I was too inexperienced, too unskilled, not able enough to figure out what she was trying to say to me. So I wasn't able to save her. And that lives with me to this day. I can still see her eyes. I can still see the expression on her face. And I always will. So I wasn't able to save her. Now, I wasn't going through what she went through. What she went through was 100 million times worse than what I was going through. But I would still tell you, and if I was speaking to an audience of 1,000 people or more who were thinking of or needing to go to court and who might need to give evidence, I will still tell you that the experience I went through, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. That's how bad it was. That's how awful it was. Um, I went. I couldn't answer any questions. I couldn't deal with. I mean, I was. My mouth was open. I was stuttering and stumbling. That's all I was able to do. The judge looked at me like I was. I don't know, as if I was some kind of aberration. I don't know. They couldn't believe I was as pathetic as I was because I couldn't answer anything, and I didn't know how I was going to deal with this. Anyhow, eventually, as I say, it was the worst experience of my life. But eventually, I don't know how long it went on. I have no recollection of how long the court process was in that day because I was totally traumatized. Eventually, it finished, and I somehow I wanted to run a mile. I wanted to leave social work. I wanted never, ever, ever to be in that position ever again. But something made me say, no, I'm not going to do that. Something made me say, I'm going to make sure that never happens to me again. Right? And I couldn't save that little girl, but I could save a lot of people going through the same kind of abuse that I went through. And I do call it abuse because it was abusive. It really was abusive. And someone who was already traumatized. So I decided to go back to court time and time and time again and repeat my experiences at court so that I became really, really good at giving evidence. And I did that to the point that I was not only to be able to give great convincing evidence, but I could also help other people, mentor other people at giving evidence at court who've been through a whole range of other things. I can help them to deal with that situation. And I wrote a book eventually on giving evidence at court. It's called Family Court, Giving Evidence in the Family Court by me. So in the end, I was able to move all this way. But what I realized is that I was able that to help people because of what my experiences. Now that didn't make me anything special. I wasn't anything special. I wasn't superhuman or anything like that. Right? I was just someone that had learnt because of my experiences that were hugely, really painful. I'd learned how to take care of myself. My attitude had changed. My attitude has changed. I wasn't any longer looking for someone to take care of me. I was able to take care of myself, and I'm able to take care of other people. Yeah. Anyone else who had been through that sort of thing could do the same thing if they'd been through it. Yeah. If they, you know, if they had the same experiences. Now, for me, because I'd gone through that, I'd learnt, I'd learnt a four-step system. Four-step system about how to give great evidence in court, how to get the kind of results that you want at court, and it's a four-step system, and it's called the calm system. The calm system. Now the first letter is C, and C stands for calm. You have to be calm when you're giving evidence at court. Are most people calm when they're giving evidence at court? No, they're not. I don't know about you. I don't know of your experience, but most people, when you're giving evidence at court, you're all over the place because you're nervous, you're anxious, you don't, it means a lot, and you want to get the result that you want to get, but you're frightened about it. But you have to be in control of yourself. You have to be calm and in control of yourself. That's the first step. And that doesn't happen overnight. You don't just click your fingers and get there. You have to work at that. Yeah. The second step in the process is A for attitude. You have to have a great attitude. You don't have a great attitude, that's going to show itself in a number of ways. I don't know about you, Andrea, but if you've ever seen people with a bad attitude, you can see them a mile off. You can see they're not in a good place. They're angry, they're cursing, they're swearing. Or even if they're not saying anything, you can just see by their look on their face and their body language, the way they're carrying on, that they're not in a good place and maybe they're going to be nasty or unpleasant. Now, does having a bad attitude help you at court? No, you're absolutely right.
Probably not. Not at all.
No, it doesn't help you in the slightest. It's really bad for you when you've got a bad attitude. You're telling people you're relaying this information a mile off that you've got a bad attitude. Now, number one, it doesn't help you with the judge because the judge is marking you down. Judge is not looking favorably at you because your attitude is not good. But even more important, the barristers are watching you. They're watching you like a hawk, and they figured out that they're rubbing their hands because they're thinking, oh, this one's going to be easy. This one is going to make my life very, very easy. Because if you're already in a bad attitude, you're already in a bad mood, barristers only have to say a few little things, and they can have you right where they want you. So you have to have a great attitude. So that's the second point. The third step in the process begins with L, and you have to be able to listen. Listening is so important, and it hits me that, and it hurts me that had I been a better listener, I might have been able to understand what that little girl was saying to me. She wasn't talking, she wasn't verbally speaking to me, but her body language was saying everything, but I couldn't pick it up. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't interpret it properly. Had I been a more attentive listener, had I thought even about what I was feeling when I was going to that place, because I was feeling uncomfortable going there. I was feeling uncomfortable being inside there. How much more uncomfortable must it have been for her, this poor little girl, relying on parents who weren't there to protect her, weren't there to care for her, who weren't there to nurture her. Instead, they were there abusing her. How much more uncomfortable must that have been? I should have been able to pick that up, but I wasn't. I was too naive, too unclear. And I was also, I have to admit this, as painful as it is, I was also thinking about myself because it was so uncomfortable going there. I wasn't used to that.
Mm.
Yeah. So it was an awful experience. And I also think, sometimes you like to be liked. I like to be liked. And they were showing me very clearly that they didn't like me. They hated me. They detested me. So that was something else I was trying to struggle with at the time, which was difficult for me. But at the end of the day, what it meant is that I wasn't where I should have been and wasn't skilled enough to care for that little girl. Care for her in the way of protecting her in the way that she needed to be protected. And this is something else that I have to say is that when you give evidence, what barristers will do is they will turn the things around and they'll make it look like you killed the little girl. They'll make it look like that. They'll ask you questions that if you're not thought out, you haven't thought it through, you won't know how to answer it. They'll slant the way they talk in such a way that you'll feel terrible about it if you don't know what they're doing and if you don't know how to answer their questions in an appropriate professional manner. So all that was going on. Now, listening also, I should have been listening to myself because something inside of me was telling me things aren't right, but I didn't want to look at it. I didn't look at it effectively or sufficiently. Yeah. Also, you have to listen to what the barristers are asking of you and what the judge might ask you. You don't listen carefully, you're going to miss things. You're not going to be able to answer questions appropriately because you haven't listened to it. So, listening is a key skill, and that is the third step on the process. Final step on the process begins with the letter M. It is called mindfulness. You have to not only listen, but then you have to think. Think about what is being asked of you. Think about how you're going to answer that question. Think about the feelings that are going through you. Think about everything that's going on so that you're able to answer the question in a way that shows you up, that demonstrates that you are well thought out, that you're professional, that the arguments you've been making are consistent throughout so that you get the best result at court. So the judge looks at you, looks at your evidence and values it highly. Yeah.
Mm.
So those four things is the steps that people need to know about in order to give great evidence at court. And I highlight them because I mean a lot of people don't know about what they need to do. A lot of people aren't in that position. A lot of people have difficulty with that because number one, they're nervous. Number two, they're anxious. Number three, they don't feel they've got the confidence. Number four, they haven't got the experience. Number five, they really they're feeling intimidated, and all in all, don't feel that they have the skills, the experience, the time, the coaching, or the mentorship and support to be able to give their best experience, give the best answers, and give best responses at court. And also often they're going to court at a very difficult time. I went to court when I was traumatized. I felt guilt over what I did and didn't do. This little girl, this poor little girl, had died. It was a kind of loss and bereavement as well that was going on for me. I was so traumatized that I suspect my mental health wasn't great at the time. All these things were going on. You're going through that, for want of a better word, it's crap or shit. You're going through that, and there's no one there to support you. When you go to court, you need people to support you. You need that emotional support. If you don't even get the other practical support, you definitely need the emotional support before and after court. Now, as I say, there's a lot of people that go through that and they don't feel they can get that help. But as I say, if you go through that 4-step system, takes you a little while. It's not going to happen like that overnight. But if you go through those 4-step system, you'll be able to be able to support yourself effectively and give good evidence. If you practice it, you can do it. Yeah. And when should you do that? When's the best time to do it? Well, the best time to do it was yesterday, but the next best time to do it is today. Yeah, because what I want to remind you, and if I was talking to 1,000 people or more than 1,000 people, I would remind them that when you're in court, when you're in that witness box, it's too late. You're trapped. You don't get released until the judge releases you. You're trapped and you can't get any help. You have to be able to help yourself, and you can't do that unless you've already had that help beforehand. You've had to work that through, thought that through, figured out how you're going to answer those sort of questions well in advance. Because by the time you get into the witness box, it's too late. Okay, so you need to do that now.
Mm.
Okay, so the point of this discussion and the point of me saying all that is because I know that there's an awful lot of people who need that same support. They need that help. Now, whether you're going, some people some people are professionals. They're going to go to court regularly. Well, fairly regularly. Very few people go to court very regularly. And so because you don't go to court that regularly, they still go through the same problems, but slowly they pick it up. I was different because I made sure I went to court again, 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 again. I just kept doing it until I got good at it. And by the way, just to say, it didn't take me 30 years or 30 plus years to get good at giving evidence. It took me a matter of weeks and months.
Mm.
Right? I just learned each time. But what I will say, and what is a testament to the of how bad and the experience was for me, it took me 30 years before I felt comfortable and confident enough to tell my story. That's how terrible it felt. For such a long time, I didn't want to tell this story because I didn't feel confident and comfortable about it. I didn't feel all right. I still had guilt. I still had feelings. I still had all sorts of things about why I didn't want to go down that road, why I didn't want to share my story with other people. And to fast forward now to this point, I don't want anyone else to go through that because the legal system hasn't changed. Now, whether you're a social worker who has to go to court every now and again, whether you're an expert witness who has to go to court every now and again, whether you're a children's guardian, whether you are just a parent, whether you're just Joe Public who once in a blue moon has to go to court, your experiences at court can be highly traumatic depending on what you have to go through. Even if you don't have to have had a child death like I had. It may be anything else, but you may be being abused by your partner. You may have been gone down the road and got knocked over, or by someone, or got mugged, or something like that, or someone else might have been, stealing money for you. Whatever it is highly, highly adversarial, full of conflict. So it could be highly traumatic. and very distressing. So I don't want that for anyone because I know, as I said, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So people need to be prepared for this. People need to be prepared for it. The problem is people don't know about it and people don't recognize how serious it is. But until it's over, until you're in that process, and as I said, once you're in that process, once you're in the witness box, it's too late. It's done. So people need to know about that and get the support now. If they're going to court, if they're likely to be going to court, they need to know about it now.
Yeah.
So that is my story largely. As I said, I wouldn't want anyone else to go through that, and people can learn from my experiences rather than go through their own grief and painful and difficult circumstances.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Great story. I think I have a few insights, and then I'm gonna ask you some questions as well. I think firstly, I think there might be a lot of people who stay stuck in some situation that they where they don't have to be because they fear going to court. Say being in an abusive relationship, being in an abusive marriage, and going through the divorce. One of the aspects of why they stay is maybe because I'm gonna have to go through the legal system. I'm gonna have to deal with this. I'm gonna have to testify or whatnot. And that's especially for people who are already struggling is very scary. I think so. It's really
Yeah.
awesome that you're teaching that you're sharing your story now. Another thing that popped into my mind. Can you say the acronym again? The calm.
Calm, CALM. Yeah, calm. First letter is for calm, being calm and being in control of yourself. Second letter A is for have a great attitude. Is A for attitude. Third third step is L for listening. How important it is to listen. And the fourth and final step is M for being mindful, thinking about
Mm,
what you're going to say before you answer, thinking that through.
yeah, and
That
and
makes
so
sense.
makes total sense. I love that acronym, and I think for you it's in the context of court, but I would say that this applies for any higher pressure situation or for any conflict resolution or for any tough conversation, which might be more
Absolutely.
applicable to like everybody's life, right? Because a lot of times,
Absolutely.
like you said, going to court is can be relatively rare, but having tough conversations or resolving conflict, that's in everyday life all the time, right? So I think that's an amazing
Absolutely.
acronym that I will remember and I will probably use and I will refer to when it comes to like higher pressure social situations. Because a lot of the work that I
Yes.
do is helping people with social anxiety, and so that comes with being afraid of these conflicts and being conflict avoidant and not knowing how to handle it. So great acronym. Thank you for sharing that. I'm very happy to learn that myself.
Thank you. Thank you.
In terms of like, I mean, I can't even imagine going through something like you went through at the beginning of your career, right? I'm curious of how much did you blame yourself for that, and how did it impact your own mental health, and how did you manage to deal with it and get out of it eventually, to the point that you're sharing the story, you wrote a book about it, and you're going on podcasts, you're going to be putting yourself out there more, you said. So
Yeah, I've got a
what was the
podcast on it.
process?
Yeah.
What was the process?
To answer your question, I blame myself a lot at first and for probably a long time. But I also recognized that if you don't know certain things and you're not experienced in certain areas, you're just not gonna know. It's not your fault. It's just that that is the reality of the situation. Um, and you feel guilty because I wanted to save that. I wanted to save that little girl.
Mm,
I was her one hope. I was a one hope, you know, in in a land where there was no hope. I was the one piece of hope, and that's why she was looking at me. Um, but it's like being in a relationship, and maybe you haven't done the right things in the relationship. Maybe it hasn't gone as well as you'd like to go, and that's some of that is definitely your fault. And you wish you'd have known, or you wish you'd have figured out what you figure in hindsight, you can figure out what you should have done. This has happened, and I should have done this. I should have done that. Damn, I wish I'd have done that, and it would have been all right, or whatever. But it's too late. It's done. And all you can do from then on is learn from it, go through that lesson, learn from it, and figure out how you can apply that in other areas, which is great, which is why, it's really useful. You say, yes, these high pressure situations other than court can be really useful. You can use that acronym in that. And that's all you can do. You can all you can do is figure that out. And once you figure that out, you can somehow think, okay, um, this is how I can do that. This is how I can live my life now. How I got over it, it was a long time, but how I got over it is because I got kind of into personal development as well.
Mm,
And how I got over it was because I look at life, I look at what's going on in this world, and I can see an awful lot of things that in my mind aren't right. I see so many things that aren't right. I see so many things where countries, powerful people, powerful institutions, politicians, they're doing things that just aren't right. In my view, it might be
yeah,
different. You may have a different view, but in my view, there's an awful lot of the way we look at things are not the right way. They're not the right. Not only not right, they are harmful. The way we're looking at things. So for me, I thought to myself, I want to have an impact. I wanna I wanna make this world better for my kids or my grandchildren or my great grandchildren down the line or my descendants. I want to make this world better for my friends, for my community, for people I don't even know now who will need that help, who don't need the world to be unpleasant, who don't need to go through horrible things where people just don't care about you. I want to make the world a better place. If I'm going to do that, I have to embody that. I have to be part of that better, doing things that are better. And that means me sharing my story. That means me not only sharing this particular story, but as you say, looking at how my story can be, relatable, to other people who are going through not court, it may be court, or it may not be court, it may be something else, not court, but something that's relatable around. Maybe people, just as you say, who are going through domestic abuse, yeah, who are going through mental health problems, who are going through, I don't know, any other type of loss or difficulty, whatever. So that was how I got over it because I realized that there are people out there who need to know this information. They need to know. They need to be able to help themselves. And often, what happens is when you're going through it, when you're going through domestic abuse, when you're going through certain things, you think you're on your own. You're the only person, but you're not. There are millions of people, probably, billions of people going through the same sorts of things that you're going through. It's just that you're not sharing it. You don't feel able to share it. So for me, I realized oh, put it another way. This is my time. It took me many years, many years, not wanting to share this, not wanting to go into this. I'm not there anymore.
yeah.
Yeah?
Wow.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think it's really awesome and it's really wonderful that you've been able to work through it and heal through it. And so now you've flipped it into something inspirational, right? And you're using it to create positive change in the world for other people as well. And I think that's like one of my favorite things about doing this podcast or speaking to people and being in these circles of just people who have been able to turn their pain into purpose or their mess into a message.
Yeah,
and
I like
and
that. Pain into purpose and mess into message. Good. Yeah,
yeah, I've met so many inspirational people and people who've met books and made speeches and speaking on conferences and whatnot. Um, and I'm myself like to think that or like to believe and think about myself as one of them because I used to have very bad social anxiety, and it was a part where I also didn't want to talk about it, right? Like it was the stage of like, okay, I'm really going through this, or maybe I've made some progress. It's a little bit in my past, but like I hope I'm never gonna talk about this. It's like shameful. It's embarrassing. I never want to talk about these things. And now because I've been doing this professionally for the past 4 years, helping people through their own struggles, it's like I'm looking for the most embarrassing, the most painful moments that I had. And I've
Yeah,
also noticed that every time I share the story or every time I talk to somebody about it, it solidifies even more. And I move past it, doesn't affect me anymore. Whereas when I started speaking about it, it was still very emotional and it was
yeah,
still relatively very charged. But the more you kind of bring it out, and the more it solidifies and heals you as well. So I've found that also for me, like very healing, just the act of sharing and putting it out there. Has
yeah.
that been the same for you when it's like gotten easier and easier since you started talking about it?
Yeah, it has. It has since you once I started, it was right. But also, you see, because I started my own podcast, the Incredible Witness podcast, which is
Mm-hmm.
related to it. But I was also doing before I did that, and I still do a newsletter on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So it's called the Incredible Witness newsletter. So I'd already started doing articles talking about it, writing about it. But once I've started um, the podcast, and just very recently, I've started. I did a not teaching, sorry, a public speaking course,
Mm.
which is what I'm very into now because I want to use my public speaking to get my podcast up up there, in the mind of audiences, sort of thing. So once I started that's made it even more easy for me to talk
Yeah.
about it. Yeah. Um, and it's almost like the more you do when you are, you're wanting, and I think, sorry, to answer that better, a lot of the time you're worried about speaking because it's all about you. Yeah. But
Mm.
once you realize you've turned it around, it's not all about you. It's about them. It's about who you
Yeah.
can help, who you can, assist, who you can support, who you can advise, who you can help make things better for. Then it's not. Then you're not so worried about. You don't focus on you know being fearful about letting these things out or discussing it.
Yeah.
It's no longer about you. It's about other people, and that makes it much easier because you're focused on the right thing as opposed to focused on yourself.
Yeah. Awesome insights. Awesome insights. Well, I can definitely say that you are an amazing speaker. You have a wonderful, very captivating story, and the way you tell it is really engaging, really amazing. And
Thank you.
I could
Thank you.
even like you definitely made me interested in just like your whole life and the world of social work because I'm like that I don't know almost nothing about it, right? But
Yeah.
when you told the story like right in the beginning, I was like, wow, like what I would even want to hear and want to learn more about is just the life of a social worker, right? And this could be a book even if
Yeah.
we wrote about a book about going to court, but I'm not sure if you thought about this, but that would be something that I would be definitely personally interested in because you said you've been 30 years and that's how your career started. So like now my
Yeah.
brain went, oh my God, what happened in the next 30 years? Like how many different situations and how did it work out and what he's been through and what he's witnessed, how many people he's helped, or has there been any other situations where like it ended this way that, hopefully if we had more education or, the management was better or whatnot, that we could have the system could have helped or saved more people. So I think that would be like something very interesting and intriguing in and of itself.
Mhm.
Your 30 years of experience in social work must be just
Yeah.
completely fascinating.
Yeah. I'd have to say the worst experience was the death of the
Yeah,
child. But there's so many experiences you have in social work.
yeah,
Some of them are really good. Sometimes you've done something and that that it's your work. Maybe it's your work and someone else's, and the child and the parent, all together you're able to do some fantastic work, and that's great. And you can see a positive outcome. It's brilliant. Often, more times than not, you're not getting the result that you want to get.
mm,
Um, Parents don't like you, they don't want you there. We live in a society that hates social workers. They don't
Yeah.
value social workers.
Yeah.
They think social workers, what do social workers know? I've heard even professional people say, oh, what do social workers know? You know, and it hits me. You think to yourself, they're working on a case. Not that doesn't mean that social workers know everything. No, no, they don't know everything. But who can work, 30 years or 10 years or even 20 years doing something and still people think stuff you don't know anything? It just makes you laugh. You think, who the hell are you? I couldn't dream of
That's
telling
true.
someone who's done worked for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years at some and say, oh, you don't know who are you? That just
Yeah.
tells you all about how social workers are valued and seen and viewed
Yeah.
in this society.
Yeah.
And that's where they're at. So there's a lot of things that you look back and you think, I wish that was different. I wish I could make that different. When a child dies, social workers always get it in the neck.
Mm.
They always, whether whatever they've done, they might have done the best work possible. Doesn't matter. We live in a society that's going to blame. They're always looking for someone to blame,
Yeah.
and social workers are always easy to blame. And what's even worse than that, and I'm going to tell you something that is so true in my view. A child dies on average. A child dies once per week in the UK,
Mm.
and they're killed by by parents or a step parent.
Wow.
Yeah, one child dies at least once a week by their parents or step parents in the UK.
Wow.
When I heard that, it really shocked me, but I
Damn.
realised that's true now. And you know what happens? Rather than the media look at the parents, they might look at the parents, but what they'll try to do is they want to blame. We as a society, it's not just the media; it's the media and the public and the politicians. And as a society, what we want to do, and I think it's because they can't deal with it. They cannot deal with the fact that this is the reality of what's going on out there in the world. This is what's going on in this society in the UK in 2024. That's what's going on. Because they can't deal with it, it's easier for them to lay blame. And they lay blame wherever they can. And the easiest places to blame is if that child was known to social services. And therefore, they want to blame social workers.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. Rather than look at what they did or what they didn't do, were they a good enough neighbour? Were they around for that child? Were they around for the family? Was the person had mental health difficulties? What pressures were they under? The person who killed the person. Should they have known? Should have other people know? There are all sorts of things, but they don't want to look at that. No one wants to look at that.
Yeah.
What they want to look at is who they can blame for it, because they want to sleep well thinking, that person is
Yeah.
blamed, and they don't want to take their responsibility for it. And that's the society we're living in. You know, there are lots of good things about society. That's one of the shittiest things about society, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we're living right here and now.
Yeah.
And that's an
Yeah.
example of the type of thing that I think needs to change. And there's
Yeah.
lots of things
Oh
that
yeah.
need to change. I
I
could
would
say
say
about a lot of other things, but I'll start with it. I'll start there.
in this case, I would say just like people being more attentive and like you said, like in neighbor, for example, right? Like just caring more for each
Mm,
other and for your neighbor. I think that's how it used to be back in history.
whenever. Yeah,
But now, especially in big cities, I mean, in small villages, it still happens,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
people know each other, people care for each other, and that's why if something happens, like say in a small village, and your house burns down, like somebody's gonna offer you to stay at their house. If your house burns down in a big
yeah,
city, you're basically on the streets, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think especially somewhere like in modern society, in big cities and in bigger communities, people need to care for each other more overall.
yeah,
And but yeah, I totally get it. It must be super hard, especially like you said, getting blamed for all of this. And that's why I think a book like this, of like a life of a social worker or something like that, could be very valuable for for society and for people to really understand in terms of I might be a little bit biased because I care very deeply about mental health and about fellow humans because I know what it's like to suffer, and that's why I think we have to push it out there more and more. So, all right, well, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah,
Where can people find you except your Facebook profile?
Andre, it's gone low now. I can just about hear you for some reason, but
Hmm.
anyhow,
Okay.
um, people can get me on Michael 240656 on Instagram.
Okay.
People could get me on LinkedIn, Michael Watson, Incredible Witness newsletter, and I put my podcast on hold at the moment because I've not got enough
Hmm.
people. But it's going to come out again as soon as I've got myself up there. It's called the Incredible Witness Podcast, yeah?
All right.
And that's on
Wonderful.
on on Spotify
All right.
and what's the other one? And can't remember. It's gone out of my head now.
Apple podcast or something.
Apple,
Probably.
Apple, yeah,
Yeah.
Spotify and Apple, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you,
All
Andre.
right.
What would I do without you? Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed this.
I,
I really enjoyed this.
yeah. It's awesome. If you can later on send me either via email or messenger chat your LinkedIn profile or like a
Yeah,
link to your LinkedIn profile, I can tag it. I'll also tag your Facebook profile in the
yeah,
replay.
yeah. I'll
Yeah.
send that, and I'll send my copy. I'll send the link to my book as well. All right.
Yes. Perfect. Sounds great. And
Yeah,
yeah. So
Andre,
thank you
thank you
so
so
much for
much.
doing this. Have a great
Thank
rest of
you.
the day, and
Yeah,
I'll
keep
see you around.
keep in touch, man.
Yes.
Keep in touch. I'd like to know how your podcast is going because I think it's really good. I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very
All
much.